Today, our scripture is from Isaiah chapter 6, verses 1 through 8. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting on a throne, high and lofty, and the hem of his robe filled the temple. Seraphims were in attendance above him. Each had 6 wings. With 2 they covered their faces, and with 2 they covered their feet, and with 2 they flew. And one called to the other and said, Holy, 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 as the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. The pivots on the thresholds shook at the voices of those who called, and the house filled with smoke. And I said, Woe is me, I am lost, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips. Yet my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. Then one of the seraphims flew to me, holding a live coal that had been taken from the altar with a pair of tongs. The seraphim touched my mouth with it and said, Now that this has touched your lips, your guilt has departed, and your sin is blotted out. Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, Whom shall I send, and who will go for us? And I said, Here am I, send me. Here ends the reading.
Let us pray. Gracious and loving God, may our words and our thoughts, our reflections and our actions be a blessing to you and all that you love, always. Amen. So, I have decided that we should finish this chapter because that was a really nice reading. So let's make it a little worse. Chapter 6 goes on to say, And God said, Go and say this to the people. Listen intently, but don't understand. Look carefully, but don't comprehend. Make the mind of all this people dull. Make their ears deaf and their eyes blind, so they can't see with their eyes or hear with their ears or understand with their minds and turn and be healed. And I said, How long? And God said, Until cities lie ruined with no one living in them, until there are houses without people and the land is devastated. The Lord will send the people far away, and the land will be completely abandoned. Even if 1/10 remain there, they will be burned again. Like the terebinth or the oak, which is cut down, leaves a stump. Its stump is the holy seed. It got dark. And I have a whole sermon explaining it. And then I trashed it this morning. So, around the year 2000, theologian John Cobb, who's the premier and if there's a founder of theologies, he's the founder of process and open relational theologies, which you may not have ever heard the terms of, but they're things I like, so you've probably heard ideas about them. Around 2010, he came to the leaders of Claremont Seminary and said that he decided he wanted to host the last conference of his life. He was already in his 80s. He had asked his children, who were not young, probably in their 50s, if they would be willing to give up their inheritance, the money he had saved up, for the purpose of this conference. And they agreed. And 5 years later, thousands of people gathered. Not around the idea of climate change, not on how to fix the problem that we are creating, how to stop it, but around how communities are going to exist afterwards. It was the ecological civilization, as Philip Clayton calls it. They had breakout sessions on what cooking would look like, on growing food, on fuel, on baking, on theology after climate destruction. And it seems that some of the smartest people I can think of who make their important issue climate and climate change, no matter how they get to it, if it's theology or business or whatever, have come to the conclusion that we cannot avert disaster. But they have not given up hope. They have not given up hope that a community of people can gather and build a society afterwards that is focused on the care of the earth and on each other. And with that as their view of the future, it's not that we sit around and wait for terrible things to happen, and instead we build the world that we're hoping to live in then, now. And we do not function asking, what can I do as an individual, but function as if we are already a community. It's not about the individual, it's about us. The very first things we do is build community, and then we go make small changes together. And that grows like a seed that grows and seeds and grows some more. And in that way, the hard times and the difficult times and the seeming destruction of institutions and the way of life that we have always done things, particularly when our institutions and the way we have always done things have been at the expense of other people along the way. When they come to an end, we already know that there is hope because there is a seed that's already been growing that is the beloved community. And I think that is the word of hope that God was giving Isaiah. Yes, there were going to be hard times, there was going to be destruction, but Isaiah said yes before God even told him what he was going to be doing. It's the Hebrew word hinai, close enough, which is the yes before the question. It's the absolutely anything you want when someone asks a favor. It's a yes based on a relationship. Isaiah trusted God so much that Isaiah said yes before he heard the call of what he needed to do, and then went and did it. I wonder if we could do the same. Yes, we will build the beloved community. Yes, we will keep those on the margins safe. Yes, we will speak a word of hope even if we don't know what that means yet. And then we go out and do it, no matter what it is, in love. So, for the rest of our sermon time, I am giving up my time. I've invited some folks to come, JJ and Amy, to speak not about climate, but about other things going on in our world, about how our young queer students have been experiencing changes over the last few years in, you're gonna have to come around this way, probably Kettle Moraine, but in our surrounding school districts over the last few years, the last few weeks, about troubled times, and I hope about how we can be the beloved community to them.
Hey everybody, thanks for having us. My name's Amy. I am a parent and Mike, my name's Amy. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Fantastic. I am a parent and a teacher, amongst many other hats that I wear, but super excited to be here today. We're going to let JJ start. You want to tell them who you are and get going?
Sure. My name's JJ. I'm a trans male. I used to go to the Kettle Moraine School District before dropping out due to bullying. And now I am an advocate for trans youth and LGBTQ plus youth.
Okay, I'm working on it, JJ. Here we go. We already say this?
Yeah. All right. So today's youth and their general positive experiences. So because of just regular culture today, being on the LGBTQ is mostly accepted among peers, which is pretty good. And most teachers tend to support their students, which is also relatively good. Being able to be on the LGBTQ gives you a sense of community with your peers and something special to bond over with, which not a lot of other students get. I asked 24 students statements about their experience being gender diverse and how it was for them, and I tried to find positive statements about their experiences, and I couldn't really find any of them. I couldn't really find anything about that. The only thing I could really find was that the positive experiences that they had, they created amongst themselves. There was nothing created within the school districts, which is why there's an NA in the other category there. The students had to create their own positivity within themselves. They had to validate themselves. They had to create their own community because the school districts were not respecting them. They were not validating them. They were not protecting them in the way that they should have. So I went through these 24 interviews, and these are the words that kept coming up over and over and over again. And I felt that these words needed to be highlighted. But there's words about fears of being bullied, school didn't actually care, having thoughts about suicide, no help, feeling unsafe at school, feeling isolated, feeling unsupported, and that's just not how trans youth should be feeling in our schools today, especially in 2024, 2023, and yeah, that's kind of how things are going. So for negative experiences, there's quite a lot, but to kind of connect things, it can feel really lonely, like there's no one supporting you, especially because of some policies that are put into place by school board members and the way that it restricts teachers from supporting their students. You can be met with a lot of stereotypical assumptions about your identity, and that causes people to distance themselves from you because they don't want to be caught up in any potential repercussions from associating themselves from you, so you tend to be on your own. Jokes are made that stigmatize your identity further, and that just kind of tends to make things worse. Like, oh, you're gay, okay, well, you're probably gonna I can't be friends with you if you're gay because you're gonna like guys all the time, and that makes me uncomfortable. I've heard that many times when I was in school, and it was not only arrogant, but it was untrue, and I watched a lot of friends miss out on a lot of friendships because of it. Dissociation is just a sense of not being able to see themselves, be present in school because of a lack of representation in books, curriculum, especially now. We see that especially now that curriculums are being dubbed as ideology when people are saying that teachers are teaching kids how to be on the LGBTQ, when we have LGBTQ inclusive curriculum. But having inclusive books where kids can read about main characters and actually identify with the main characters instead of always reading about straight cisgender characters is vital to their success. And not having that, it makes it really hard to focus, concentrate, and be engaged in the classroom. uncertainty has a lot to do with not knowing if the teacher that you have, if you have to go up to that teacher that day and say, hey, my name is JJ, I'm trans, can you call me that? Or if you have to fear that they're going to go and look at whatever's on Infinite Campus and use that name in front of all of your classmates and out you. And suddenly then all of your other classmates are going to start calling you that name and bring up some pretty bad experiences that you have with that. And that's a pretty big deal for someone who's trans, someone who's already transitioned, and it's also a pretty big statement on a teacher's end to do that because it shows openly that they do not support you and that they're not respectful of you as a person. Being scared, anxiety. Societal norms kind of define that you have to be man or woman enough, or that you have to conform to either one. It's in a sense, it's like if you're not man enough, then you're kind of seen as, if you're not man enough, then you're not a man. If you're not girly enough, you're not a girl. If you're non-binary, then what do you do then? Then it's not something that people recognize. People make claims that there's only a such thing as boys and girls, but non-binary people very much exist. Intersex people very much exist. And the failure to recognize that creates stigma and makes people super uncomfortable and limits their freedom of expression, and it doesn't make people feel welcome. From the outside perspective, now that I'm not in school anymore, I know why these things were happening. And it's because of politics, which really sucks. Politicizing aspects of students' identities make students themselves a debatable topic. So when you introduce politics into the classroom, into the curriculum, that's when you can start saying, this is not okay to teach students because it's politics and I don't want my student taught that and I'm not okay with it. And that means that you can start saying transgender students are not real because I don't believe that, which has happened in multiple school board meetings and in front of transgender students. School operations change depending on the political affiliations of the most dominant school board members. So we see policies passed that are primarily in favor of a political party that is pushing for conservative agendas or very harmful agendas. And we see it that it harms youth, and we see a big pushback from transgender youth as well. Refusing students equal rights to having their chosen name, having their pronouns, also takes a toll on them because it's just refusing them the right to be seen as themselves and the right to be them. And you're just saying, we don't respect you, we don't see you. And that's something that's coming from a body of people who are at the highest level of supervision in the school district. Bias-based bullying, oftentimes with gender identity, goes unaddressed, specifically because it's gender identity. When you look at race is very heavily addressed. If you're making fun of someone because of someone for their race, it's usually heavily discouraged. If you are making fun of somebody because of their sexual orientation, there's a little bit more of a bigger deal made out of it. If you're making fun of somebody for their gender identity, you get more of a swat on the hand, and that fosters that kind of hostile behavior and teaches students that it's more okay. But more so is when we have the adults doing that openly in school board meetings, that teaches that a school district is okay with that and that it's okay for students to do. So these are some stories and statements from some transgender students from the school districts that were had some support and struggled with having any support. And then I also included a statement from someone who's a cisgender male. So he was one of my friends who actually noticed a huge change and found a problem with the school when pride flags actually were banned, and started feeling a change within himself and started feeling really bad because of the school culture and the way that the school was acting and behaving towards transgender students, and it was taking a toll on him. School board members, they're elected or appointed members of the community. They're supposed to create rules and regulations and policies that are supposed to benefit all parties within the school district and the community. But when political agenda enters the highest governing group of people, everyone in that school district is impacted. So what can we do as family, friends, educators? Okay, we skipped a part. All right. Did we skip a part?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Okay. Well, what I'm going to say is we know that policies that harm, we already know that policies that ban transgender individuals from access to restrooms, access to facilities, their pronouns, being able to use their preferred names. We know that this is harmful because there was a project done over the course of the past 3 years by the Trevor Project in some states that have passed anti-trans legislation, and we saw an increase in suicide attempts of up to 72%. And we've presented these facts to some school board members, and we're still brushed aside and still told, well, they're the minority, it doesn't really matter. And just because some people are a minority doesn't make them any less significant than the majority of people. And so we need a lot of help. So the ways that you can help, if you're family of somebody who's a gender diverse person, always check in with them and make sure that they know that you're a safe person and you're a safe place. Make sure that they know that you are on their side all the way, all the time. Make sure that if they're experiencing any kind of discrimination, any kind of harm, that they know that you are there for them and you are not going to tolerate that in any way, and you will be right on top of it. If you're a friend of somebody, make sure that you're with that person whenever they need it. If they need to go to the bathroom, walk with them to go to the bathroom. Wait outside the bathroom with them. If they need to go to the locker room, if you can go in the locker room with them or wait outside the locker room with them, just make sure that they're safe. Walk with them. Just make sure that if people are starting to harass them, stand up for them and say, hey, that's my friend. I'm not okay with you speaking to them that way. That's my friend. You don't get to talk to them that way. As educators, things are getting a little bit more tricky. As the new presidency comes around, there's going to be a lot more bans surrounding what educators can do, which is where community members are going to become even more vital to transgender youth. We can do a lot more now. We can do a lot more than educators are going to be able to do in January. And it's going to be super important that we make sure that LGBTQ youth know that they're supported, loved, and have safe places in our community in 2025. And the way that we can do this is by showing up to board meetings that are discussing policies that are targeting transgender youth, LGBTQ plus youth, discussing diversity, trying to censor curriculum, trying to erase them from policies and trying to repeal any kind of protections that they have. If you're an ally, the same thing goes for that as well. If you feel comfortable, you can use Fair Wisconsin, G-Safe, the Trevor Project's action alerts, and you can go to the Wisconsin State Capitol, and you can talk and stand up and say like why you oppose certain legislation that's being passed that poses a harm to LGBTQ plus or gender diverse youth. But there's a lot of moving pieces to it.
Thank you.
Is that it?
Yeah, I'll just kind of jump in here. Thanks, JJ. That was awesome. Thank you. That couldn't have been easy sharing some of that. That was pretty good. So I just, I am not a transgender individual, but I have a transgender child. I have transgender friends. I have a bisexual child, and I have a cisgender, which if you don't know, I didn't once upon a time know what a cisgender was, and that just means that you identify with the same gender as birth. Am I right? Yep. So like I'm cisgender. And so in our home, we represent a lot of diversity. I'm also an educator. I've taught at the college level, and now I teach at the middle school and high school level. And so I'm around diverse communities all the time. JJ's right. It gets trickier to be an educator and be an ally. But that doesn't mean we can't be. And I think, JJ, by ending with what we can do is so critical, because it is, you're not wrong. It's sad right now, and it's hard right now, and it's scary right now. And there's hope. Like, we have to come together for all of us. For me as a parent, the people that come out to me, and I live in Delafield. It's a community where I don't know who my allies are as a parent. And so when other people come to me and share, like, hey, Mac's looking really good, or, it lets me know, like, oh, you're an ally to me as a parent, too. Like, I can be myself. So just taking that first step at the micro level, right? So I'll kind of talk like micro and macro. At the micro level, just taking that first step, like you all did here. You saw us standing as new people, and so many of you came up and just introduced. The symbols are so important. So like Pastor Leanne has a button on with a rainbow, and Mac noticed right away, like, you're an ally. And they took all the symbols away at the schools. We're not allowed to do it anymore. So if people in the community can do it, and it might seem silly, but we know the importance of symbols over time to let people know that, like, we are together, I support you. It's safe. You can just be your authentic self with me. You don't have to filter and protect and hide. We're good. And maybe someday there's going to be a time that we don't have to do that, but we still have to. So find your ways to communicate externally that you are an ally, and that people that are different actually aren't different around you. It's just normal. How do we normalize transgender? How do we just, like, it's just part of all the ways people are? Because right now, our society, globally, locally, are trying to make it abnormal and wrong and biased and stigmatized. And so by finding ways to show, like, this is just normal. So micro level, on your own way, show some way that you're an ally so that people know and understand they can just be themselves. Also, normalize the talking of transgender. It's something like in our home when transgender, first came into our life, it was new for all of us, and we had to, like, practice using they, them pronouns. We had to practice talking in ways that we weren't used to talking, and I know it was very hard for Mac for a long time, and I will forever feel bad about that. And it is what it is, so I have to own that, like, own my responsibility in that. Like, it's my responsibility to change the way I behave, to normalize transgender, to normalize they, them, to normalize that there's lots of different ways people identify for themselves, and that is just part of humanity, and that's okay. Instead of brushing it off or talking differently about it, JJ brings up a great teaching practice that unfortunately we're not often allowed to do anymore, but I think it can be brought into the community now, like using stories and curriculum of a wide array of different genders, transgender, non-transgender, lesbian, gay, everything, all the different types of humans we are and ways we experience the world. We can't really do that anymore as teachers. We can a little bit, but it's different. And if you care about your job, you have to be careful. And I don't want to lose my job because I want to be there for all the people all the time. And so if I lose my job, it can't be. But in the community, how can you just bring normalizing stories of just talking about the array of humanity all the time, so it's not different and weird when you hear there's a transgender person around. That's normal. What did you tell me, Mac? 1 in 5 people are transgender? Like, that's pretty normal. Now, here in little old Dousman, Delafield, Wisconsin, maybe not. Maybe. We don't know because some people hide and don't share, right? So how do you normalize it? How do you just use those pronouns? Little bit bigger level, how do you not allow for discrimination? How do you become the one that carries that burden? How do I as the parent carry that burden for the people I love that are being discriminated against all the time? How do you as community members stand up and say, absolutely not, no? Recently we had a situation where we had some discrimination on our own door. Kids were trick-or-treating and threw candy at Mac. It's not okay. So as a family member, we had to struggle with what to do with that. And, the saddest thing is Mac's like, Mom, don't worry about it. It happens all the time. I'm like, whoa. We aren't normalizing that behavior. We're going to normalize that we all treat each other with kindness and compassion and love. And so I called the school district right away. I called every single parent. So be brave to have those conversations. Be courageous. Have the courageous conversation. Every single parent that I called was mortified that their kid acted that way. Now, whether they had a different conversation when I hung up that phone, I don't know. But many of them had conversations with their kids about how to act differently and how to stand up if someone's acting that way. The schools immediately stopped that behavior and took immediate action with the kids that were involved, and it stopped. And so we have to be brave as community members to have those conversations and say, no, this isn't okay. I heard about this. You need to stop it and have those conversations, because then we are disrupting that it's normal to have that, and we are normalizing that we treat everybody with care and compassion. On a bigger level, JJ's not wrong. There are scary things happening to school boards right now, and school boards govern what we can and can't do. We need people that feel able and brave enough to have those conversations on a bigger level, to go tell the school board members it is not okay to sit at a school board meeting and say transgender women are not women. Well, they are, right? It is not okay to say these things, because then that normalizes that that's the way our community is. And we have people at the school board regularly saying, well, we are just standing up for what our community wants. Our communities don't want people to use they, them. Our communities don't want pride flags in the classrooms. Our communities don't want these things. So if you truly are an ally and you really feel like that's not right, then tell people. Speak loudly about it as often as you can if you're comfortable. If letters are more your jam, write a letter. If coming to the school board is your jam, go to the school board. If going to the government is your jam, do that. But normalize talking about it and disrupting the discrimination. And just be there for people, right? Like, it took us a while to figure out who our people were. We have new friends now as families. We had to cut ties with some people. And then we got to meet some great new people that are in our lives now, which is amazing. And over time, that will continue to evolve as the conversations and the acceptance and the love and the checking on people all the time. Check on the families, check on the siblings. It's really hard for siblings to go into school and know that there's not safe places for them because they're getting discriminated against too, because their sibling is what our society has deemed different. Check on people, stop the discrimination, show symbols of support so people know that you stand, and just humanize and normalize transgender, because it isn't different. There doesn't need to be stigma around it, and there doesn't need to be discrimination around it. And so we need to keep doing our part. That was way over 10 minutes, I'm sorry. We'll stop now.